This presentation here is called Creating a City That Thinks Like the Web. It's a riff-off of a presentation that Mark Sermon gave just about a year ago to the City of Toronto when they had a Web 2.0 summit within the City of Toronto. So we're taking that and we're adapting it, and we're going to talk about the story here in Vancouver, how we got to this point, what's going on, and what we hope is going to happen in the future. It's just me right now, and already we can see the first snafu. I'm appropriately being punished for using a 4-year-old IBM laptop running Windows, and it didn't work, and so now I'm being rescued by a Mac. And so actually under citizen is supposed to say blogger. My name's David Eaves. I am kind of an open source activist, not in the coder sense, but in the sense that I believe it's important and good. I work as a negotiation consultant, so my interest in open source is figuring out how we can enable the human side of open source. How can we enable people to communicate more effectively, to work more efficiently together? Because my feeling is our competitive advantage as a community and as a process is that when the more people are able to work together with the least possible friction costs, the more the playing field tilts in our advantage. So I'm obsessed with figuring out how we reduce those friction costs. I'm also a policy geek and a policy wonk. I'm a fellow at the Center for the Study of Democracy at Queen's, but I live in Vancouver, and I grew up here in Vancouver as well. Andrea Reimer really wanted to be here today, and right now I just got a message from her. She is caught in a Metro Vancouver board meeting and is trying to get out, but she can't get out of her own free will. So she is also a citizen, but more importantly, she's a counselor, and she's the sponsor of the Open City motion that we'll be talking about. Tim Wilson, who I'm very much hoping is in the crowd right now. Tim, if you are, wave your hand.
He's back there.
There we go, thank you. So Tim Wilson has also been working with me, so we've been supporting the mayor's office and supporting Councillor Reimer and thinking about what this motion was going to look like and how we were going to advance it, and thinking about open source, open data, and open standards in the city. And Tim Wilson's a GIS guru, and I really wanted a photo of him, but there is no photo of you on the internet, shockingly, at least not one that's easily found. And just to prove to you that Andrea is really thinking about this stuff, just before the meeting started, she emailed me and she said, I think it's looking increasingly unlikely that I'm going to make it. There are 6 issues on the agenda, and one of them has to do with waste. And she's like, already the tie-in with open data is so important, because if we could create an app, over 50% of our waste in the city is organic, and we can imagine ways to allow people to share organic waste that's reusable, or to find ways to collectively recycle or compost them, if we had an app that linked people that did that, and if we had open data from the city that allowed people to find each other more easily. So her mind is very much on it. This message is literally hot off the press. She sent it to me just before the meeting started. So we have a couple of points that we want to make. The first is that the reason we're here at this conference is, yes, we have this stuff to share about the open motion in Vancouver, but that openness and participation is what created a better internet. And we think that it also allows us to create a better city. So this is our starting point. I'm not going to talk about this, but this is our underlying assumption. If you don't believe this to be true, then you should come and argue with me later, but we're not going to debate it, and this is kind of our starting point, and I think it's something that everybody in this crowd is going to find attractive. These are the points that we want to make. The first is talking a little bit about where this came from. See, we're already, you're going to have to play a guessing game here. What the Open City motion actually means, what's going to happen next, and most importantly, what can you do? So where did this come from? There's been a bunch of cities across North America that have been doing a whole bunch of interesting work around thinking about what openness means in cities. I've actually been doing most of kind of my activity in this space in Toronto, where I usually spend about one week a month. And so in Toronto, for example, you had bar camps that started up in around 2005, and that led to something called Transit Camp in February 2007, when the City of Toronto, or at least the TTC, put out an RFP for a new web page, and a bunch of web designers got together and said, we know the web page is going to suck because the RFP sucks. And so we want something more from our city, so they self-organized and created a conference called Transit Camp, where the goal was to remake the RFP to design a website that they thought citizens actually wanted. And not only did that happen, a bunch of other citizens said, well, you know, we like the web part, but actually there's a whole bunch of other things that we want to change about the TTC too. So they all got together, and it was just a big kind of brainstorm exercise, all positive, no criticism, but what can the TTC do to make life better? And the TTC showed up to their credit, and were blown away and excited by what was happening. And that for me was a big turning point in Toronto, when kind of the open meme really began to penetrate. So Mark Sermon and I and a few others organized Open Cities, which was to try to think about what open source meant for cities. And then, lo and behold, after some time, the Web 2.0 Summit happened, where all of the councillors, the mayor, and all of the city staff got together to talk about what Web 2.0 meant for the city. And there were some really some great moments in there when the mayor stood up and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to open up the data. We're going to open source all of the software that we create here in the city. And it was kind of a turning point for Toronto. And then that led to Change Camp as well in Toronto. And in Vancouver, we've had our own events. So Mark Sherman and I also, along with a couple of others, organized Open Everything up in Hollyhock last summer to talk about what openness meant for the city, but also universities, businesses. And there's been a transit camp here. And of course, most famously in DC, they've opened up their data and they ran Apps for Democracy, a $50,000 competition that created, I think, 54 applications on the net that leveraged the data from the city and matched it up with other data sets that they claim has generated $29 million worth of value for the city. So a $50,000 investment plus the sharing of the data generating $29 million worth of value for the city. So that's a little bit of where it came from. What is the Open City motion? What is this motion that got passed on the 21st of May that garnered so much attention around the world? And really, Andrea's phone's been ringing nonstop with press from around the world wanting to know, where did this come from? Why have you done it? Tell us how you did it. We want to know more. I've received phone calls from other cities who are saying, we want to replicate this motion. Can we copy it wholesale? So what does it actually say? Oh, this is going to be interesting. We can't actually see the motion. We'll start with this piece here. So I'm just going to have to kind of wing it. The motion really has three core components to it. The first component is it directs the city to share as much data as it possibly can with its citizens, insofar as that data does not violate the individual privacy of anybody. So our goal is to try to share as much data with citizens so that people out there can do their own analysis of what's going on around the city. They can do their own mashups. They can take that data and they can mash it up with other people's data to create applications that serve them and serve the citizens of Vancouver or the citizens of the world. This, for me, I think is kind of the first key piece of the motion. Is the one I think we're going to try to, I'm hoping the city's going to try to work the fastest on. The second piece is the adoption of open standards. I mean, it's great if we have a lot of data, but if that data is locked in proprietary standards that nobody can access, it really doesn't do us any good. So the goal here is to try to push the city council is directing the city to try to favor open standards whenever possible, when it's making purchasing decisions, but also when it's sharing this data with citizens. And the third piece of the motion says that open source software will be placed on the same platform as proprietary software. Now I want to be really clear about this. There's nothing in the motion that says the city must use open source software. They're under no requirements at any point now or in the future to use open source software. The goal of this motion is not to tilt the playing field in favor of open source. It's to create a level playing for open source. One of the things that I think is so dramatic and important about what open source software has managed to do is that it has matured and grown up in an environment dominated by proprietary software. You don't need a regulatory environment that favors you. You just need a regulatory environment that is fair. And that's what this motion tries to do. And I think that the important part here is now you have a mission to educate not only those in the cities, but those in the provinces and those at the federal level about why open source is a wise choice. You've got to recognize that most governments are dramatically understaffed. You know, they have to work with the very minimum amount of resources because, frankly, taxpayers don't like to pay a lot of money in taxes, and so they have to make kind of the bare essence of choices. So their capacity to analyze different software choices is limited. And the proprietary guys, they got a lot of money to spend to educate them why their choice is the right one. So if you want to do something, one of the first things you can do is begin to try to figure out what are the cost-benefit analysis of using open source software and make the analysis good. Don't make it the type that always favors you. Acknowledge the trade-offs. Acknowledge the costs. But we have a collective job to educate not only those in business, but those in government about why this choice makes sense. And this motion is designed to give you that opportunity. So then there's a kind of a little bit of a be it resolved around some of the things that I'm not going to speak to each one of these points about what the city's committing to do over kind of the short term. The most important one for me is this one here, which is identify immediate opportunities to distribute more data. And I know the councillors are going to be watching city staff very, very closely and pushing them very aggressively to try to share some data over the short term so we can get some quick wins. And here's the flip side is I haven't had a lot of contact with city staff, but the contact I have had has been tremendous. And the city staff here is really, really committed to trying to figure out how to make this motion work. They've been nothing but positive, and they're wrestling with these problems.